Today's podcast is sponsored by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. There is strength in numbers, folks. Join today at amac.us/Carter. So we've got a big show for you today. We're going to talk about China. We're going to talk about the fact that China is spreading across the globe, basically colonizing many areas of the world, including Central and South America. My guest today will be Jessica Bedoya. She's the chief of staff for the Inter-American Development Bank. You do not want to miss it. Please follow and subscribe. Get all your links at saracarter.com. That is saracarter.com. And while you are there, sign up for our email list so that you don't get shadow banned. Guys, you know how it is. We've all been worried about Twitter, about our, Facebook pages, about our ability to speak and think freely. And I think for most of us, the best way we can stay in touch and to ensure that we don't miss anything is by getting on these email lists. I promise you'll get emails from me at least once or twice a week with all the latest stories and any major updates that I think all of the listeners out there, all of you need to be aware of. One thing that I'd like to talk about before I get to Jessica Bedoya and all of our top stories today is MyPillow. And why do I want to talk about it? Because guess what, guys? MyPillow is made 100% here in America, and there are no supply chain issues. I've been dealing with that all week. I'm in Texas, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I'm going to explain to you how even in Texas, we're seeing some of our shelves just empty. Doesn't matter if I go to Walmart, doesn't matter if I'm at Target, there's issues there. Well, you don't get that with MyPillow and Mike Lindell. And Mike Lindell has done it again by introducing the new My Slippers. I have them. I know how great they are. I even got some for my daughter for Christmas. She absolutely loves them. And she's in Wyoming, and it's freezing cold over there. And these slippers keep her feet warm. And for all of you up in the East Coast that are listening to this, get some My Slippers. You want to know why? Because right now, there is 40% off the new My Slippers. 40% off. You're not going to beat that. It's been 2 years in development to ensure the highest quality and comfort. It's designed for all-day wear, indoors and outdoors. It's got a thick sole on the bottom, so you don't have to wear them just inside. They're available, listen to this, in moccasin or slip-on style. You can get either. There's a variety of colors. You can get them any kind of color you want, and they're made with quality leather suede and the exclusive 3-tier cushioning system. MyPillow patented fill, impact gel, and memory foam. For a limited time, Mike is offering 40% off on his new My Slippers. Go to MyPillow and click on the radio listener square, enter promo code Carter, or call 1-800-685-7221. While you're there, take advantage of the deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the Giza Dream bed sheets, the MyPillow mattress topper, and the MyPillow towel sets. You can only save 40%, though. Listen to this. You can only save that 40% on the new My Slippers with my promo code Carter. You got to use Carter, C-A-R-T-E-R. Call 1-800-685-7221 or visit mypillow.com. I just want to start off with New York City and how insane the state of New York is, but should not be ignored, folks. Should not be ignored, because what happens in New York doesn't just stay in New York. It spreads like a virus across the country. It ends up all over the place. It's kind of like California, right? You think, oh, that shit just stays over there. That just stays in California. Whatever we see going on there, all these crazy robberies of pharmacies and stores and, the feces all over the ground in San Francisco and people just doing whatever they want. And these crazy district attorneys that are allowing people back out on the streets who've committed very serious crimes because of the no bail, low bail system that we see both in New York and California. It never just stays there. It never just stays there. And right now in New York City, Mayor Eric Adams is refusing to veto legislation that's allowing 800,000, just listen to me, non-citizens to vote in local elections. I want you to think about that. Not only is that unconstitutional, it's setting the stage. The Democrats are basically using this as a testing ground. This is a testing ground. And New York City Mayor Eric Adams knows this. He tries to pretend he's like the harder mayor, right? He's a tougher guy. He's going to be tougher on crime. He's not. He's just setting it up. Because what they're going to do is test it out there. And if you don't throw a fit about this, and if people just let it slip on by, it will not be the only city in the country. You're going to see illegals voting everywhere. Doesn't that make you wonder why the border's been left wide open? Now you can see what's happening, right? So we've been talking about this for basically years now. Years. And all last year, I was covering the border there every single week, practically. There's a humanitarian crisis. People are suffering. Not just Americans. And we're suffering. And we have a national security issue with the border. And our Border Patrol agents, how many of our Border Patrol agents have been exposed to COVID-19? And by the way, I have a special guest with us on the show today. It's not just Jessica, but today I have a very special guest, Gary Brugman, former Border Patrol agent, pardoned, thank God, by President Donald Trump, who doesn't live too far from me here in the great state of Texas. I'm actually really grateful that I found a home here because people are flooding into Texas. You can't even find a house here. And this is an example of why. What's happening in New York, what's happening all across the country, because people are sick and tired for the most part. At least 50% of us or plus are sick and tired of what's happening in our nation. And that's pretty sad. We're dividing into two different groups. Texas and Florida, Tennessee, the free states. The free states. I want you to listen to this. Write this clip right now with New York Mayor Adams refusing to veto legislation that is allowing non-citizens to vote in the election. This is basically this gibberish is when CNN's Jake Tapper asks him why people have not sworn an oath to this nation are getting a vote. Thanks, Jake. Something we can agree on.
No, I did not change my mind. I supported the concept of the bill. The one aspect of that I had a problem with and I thought was problematic was the 30-day part of being in the country for 30 days was the place that I had questions. And I sat down with my colleagues. I'm a big believer in conversation. We have to start talking to each other and not at each other. And after hearing their rationale and their theories behind it, I thought it was more important to not veto the bill or get in the way at all and allow the bill to move forward. In New York City, just Brooklyn, for example, 47% of Brooklynites speak a language other than English at home when I was the borough president. And so I think it's imperative that people who are in a local municipality have the right to decide who's going to govern them. And I support the overall concept of that bill.
Doesn't the bill just make a mockery of the idea of American citizenship, though? I mean, this is just for local elections, but does that mean, like, next New York City is going to want non-citizens to vote in federal elections? I mean, and what do you say to all the people who went through the process, the difficult process of becoming an American citizen, studying for the test, swearing an oath of allegiance to the United States of America, who now see this legislation just saying, well, anyone who's here, you can go ahead and vote?
Well, I say to them, keep doing it. Membership has its privileges. Being a member of what we call the United States of America is a great privilege. And I would tell them, keep doing it, be encouraged. This is a great opportunity to be a member of this great country. Don't let anything daunt you or take you away from that mission. This legislation is not going to do that. Keep becoming a citizen of this country.
Why should they become a citizen of this country? They can vote. They can get a job. They don't have any of the responsibilities. And by the way, immigration and customs enforcement officers and Border Patrol agents and law enforcement officers are saying if you're a citizen, you're going to go to jail for some of the crimes that these guys commit, where they're just given a slap on the hand, a slap on the wrist, and set free. This is no joke anymore. I mean, this is what is happening in our nation. And by the way, Mayor Eric Adams doesn't even make any sense when he's talking because he knows it's complete nonsense. He can't even answer the questions to Jake Tapper. He's just rambling on and on because there is no answer here, guys. You can see that they are taking the Constitution. I'm talking these leftist radicals, these Democrats that don't even belong to our father's Democratic Party. They are just leftist, Marxist, socialists. By the way, fascism is in there too, because we've got wonderful Twitter and wonderful Facebook and all of these social media platforms that are used now to communicate with the masses that are basically creating the narrative that they want. So if we don't say what they want, they just throw us off the air. So you can't hear it. And that is dangerous too. So what did I say just before we heard that long preamble of gibberish? I was saying that the border is open for a reason. And remember, if you didn't listen to my last podcast, you need to listen to it, because I just lay it out on the line. That border is exactly the way the Biden administration wants it. That's exactly what they want. They didn't fail the border. They failed us. They failed the poor children that are being trafficked into the United States and all the people that are being abused by the drug cartels. But they don't care about them. They don't care about the kids. They don't care about us. I don't know how to put it to you this way, but they just don't care. They only care about themselves. And then I've got Jessica Bedoya coming on, and she's talking about how the banks want to invest in really long-term projects in Central America and South America, real independent long-term projects in the region, so that people from Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, other places, and we've seen how dangerous it's become there, right? You see what's happening in the United States? All you have to do is look at what's happening in the Western Hemisphere all the way around. You have socialist governments in office. You have people in office that are pushing a socialist Marxist agenda. Nothing in the world is better than freedom. Nothing. We all know that. That is the one thing, our life, our liberty, our freedom, right? Our families, that we all have those essential things. Those are human rights. So why are so many people willing to give it away? Willing to give it away. The only reason why that border is wide open, folks, is because the Democrats are establishing their base. They are lying to the people that are crossing the border. They are promising them the moon and the stars when all they are going to give them is poverty and nothing. They don't care at all about these people that are coming across. You know, when my mother came, I want to tell Mayor Eric Adams, from Cuba to the United States, when she became a citizen, she told me that was the greatest day of her life. She was so thankful and so grateful to this nation. And when people would ask my mother, "Are you Cuban?" she would say, "No, I'm American. I was born in Cuba, but I'm an American." She didn't like that. "Are you Cuban?" "No, I'm not Cuban." She would even tell other Cubans, "I don't want anything to do with Cuba anymore because I left it. I literally walked away from Cuba because we could not win that fight." We could not win that fight. And she walked away and she became an American. And I was born, and this is my, on her side, first generation American. But now I'm watching our freedom slip. Now I'm watching what's happening to our nation, just like you, in stunned horror. I mean, literally, from having supply chain issues where, I'm going to talk about this at the end of the show, where we're talking about, like, I walk into a store and there's like nothing there in the pasta shelves. Like, how could pasta be gone? And I want you to think about this. Think about what China is doing and how China is in control of that supply chain. Well, let me read you this story really quick. This is a Newsweek. China locks down city containing one of the world's busiest ports. It could impact our supply chain. It's already impacting our supply chain. The Chinese industrial city of Ningbo has been shut down due to COVID-19, and the lockdown has its port continuing to be backed up, which means, guess what, folks? You will continue to be backed up. Located in the Xinjiang province of China, Ningbo is home to the third largest port in the world. However, lockdown measures could worsen the already disrupted port as worldwide supply chain woes persist. The city is currently experiencing a small but impactful wave of COVID-19 infections, and it always benefits China. Their wave of COVID-19, even from the very beginning, benefited them. What had to happen? In Taiwan, people were rising up against the Chinese government. In Hong Kong, the people were rising up against the Chinese government. My good friend Andy Chang was there. He fought and stood up to the Chinese Communist Party, and they just arrested him multiple times and made his life just a living hell. He was with the Hong Kong National Party. But conveniently, after COVID-19 struck, everybody was on lockdown. You didn't see any more uprisings. China uses all of this chaos to their benefit, and we pay the price for it. And just to let you know how bad this can be, I mean, even right now, Fox News is reporting that the supply chain issues look like they will be far worse in the coming weeks. That we will start to see more and more shelves emptied before they get filled up. And you guys, we don't know what's going to happen. I hate to be an alarmist. I don't want to be an alarmist here. But I'm very concerned that if anything hits us sideways right now, we really are going to be vulnerable to our enemies, more vulnerable than we already are. And it's because of this Biden administration, because of the administration that honestly does not care what it is doing to the American people and to our republic. You guys, we've got to watch what's happening, and we got to remember that we are the ones in charge. We are the ones who pay their salaries in Washington, D.C. They conveniently live in a bubble because they conveniently use that so that they can avoid the reality of what is going on in the world. As long as they are the ones being protected, power stays where it is, in the swamp, Now, without any further delay, I'm going to talk to Jessica Bedoya. She's the chief of staff at the Inter-America Development Bank, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about how much China is investing in Latin America and what we need to do to counter that. First of all, thank you, Jessica, for joining the show. I am so excited to have you on because, as you know, I have been covering Central America issues dealing with Mexico and particularly the issues dealing with China's expansion in the region. So having you here is very, very important for me, and I'm sure for all of our listeners. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I want to start out because a lot of people don't know, and I have just become very familiar with what you do, but with the Inter-American Development Bank, can you explain that a little bit and the role that you all play?
Sure.
In the Western Hemisphere?
Sure. Quite frankly, and simply put, we're the premier development finance institution for Latin America and the Caribbean. We are a multilateral financial institution that's focused on development. We have 26 member countries all throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. So what we at the IDB, as I affectionately refer to it, do is we invest. We're focused on returns on investment. And what do I mean by that? Ultimately, for the countries and for the members, they want sustainable growth, jobs, development. And for us, that's what we want too. So we're a partner to our countries, to the 26 member states. We provide investment, direct financing, both public sector, which means we work with governments and provide funding to governments so that they can implement projects and reforms, policies, and otherwise that are required to build out a stronger business climate for private sector investors, as well as addressing sort of those traditional development needs that everyone talks about: poverty, vulnerability, policy reforms that help impact the people who live in their countries in a positive way. We also do private sector financing, where we do any sort of gamut of investment across a multitude of sectors in the region. In what you would traditionally discuss as sort of what is foreign investment look like, that's kind of what we do. We finance projects, we finance sectors.
So let's talk about that. So like if I wanted to invest in maybe in a business in Guatemala or in Nicaragua or in another part of Central or South America, I could reach out to the Inter-American Development Bank to do that?
That is absolutely right. We at the IDB, I'm obviously an American citizen, but I come from a heritage of Colombia and a father and an Ecuadorian mother. The president is an American citizen as well. The first time we've had an American citizen as president of the institution, who actually hails also from the region. And so we're both first-generation Americans, very committed to the region. And for the first time, what we want to do for this institution, and this is why I'm really grateful for this platform today, is we want to make sure that across the United States, everyone knows what we at the IDB do. We don't want to just be a development bank focused on Washington. We want to be a development bank focused on bringing Latin America to the rest of the United States. So yes, they can call on us.
See, that's so important to me. And I spent time in Guatemala, and I remember when I was there and I was speaking to President Yamate, one of the biggest issues, and this was actually when Vice President Kamala Harris was there. The trip for her did not end up so well, but President Yamate was saying, look, you know what we want is more cooperation with the United States. We want to develop those economic ties. We don't want to see our people leaving Guatemala to go to the U.S. I think he was sincere when he was saying that. I know there's a lot of issues with corruption that you're dealing with across the board, but is that something that you're hearing from leadership in Central America and South America, or is there like still a major concern? And I know for Americans, it's a big concern when you're dealing with corruption and issues like that.
So I will say I've spoken and met with President Giammattei personally on many occasions as a part of broader engagement that we do regularly with presidents and with ministers across the region. And the bottom line message is they desperately want sustainable investment. They have admitted that, that financing at a very small level has impact on smaller types of communities and it's really good. But they want something that can be scalable. They want financing that's sustainable, long-term, and that has a broader vision. So they want to move beyond what they feel like they have seen to date in terms of the traditional development financing structures that are out there, which is just small projects that may or may not grow roots and expand. What they instead want is a broader holistic strategy, which is what we at the IDB are trying to do with all of our clients, Guatemala in particular. How can we be strategic in helping them design investment plans that are, again, public sector focused? So again, working with governments to bring in the private sector. We want to be that bridge. And so part of what the conversations that we've had from many ministers is we know that we have risks in the region. We know that there's corruption. We know we have transparency issues. Our response is let us help you because we do all of that work and we can work hand in hand with everyone to make things better.
Right. What would some of those long-term projects look like? Especially when you're looking at big, heavy investments like in Guatemala and such. What would some of those projects, I guess, what would interest the Guatemalan government as well as the U.S. As far as long-term projects, not just small business investments that may or may not last?
So what the bank has traditionally done was exactly that, sort of had diffuse investments in small projects in smaller sectors without thinking about the creation of markets and jobs. And so we've turned that upside down. And for example, with Guatemala in particular, what we've done and what our extraordinary teams at the bank have done, we have amazing human capital. In very short order, they were able to do a complete mapping of what the highest return on investment would be and in what sectors in a country like Guatemala. So we're actually in active discussions with the government to talk about exactly those one or two sectors that we have identified that could be a boon for the government and a boon for the country in terms of bringing in U.S. investors, strengthening the business climate at the same time, and also creating long-term opportunities for job growth and creation. I think where the IDB was before is that we were a little bit stuck in the old way of doing things. And what we as a new administration have tried to do is rebrand the IDB to say, look, we want to have those conversations to have strategic plans with governments, not just finance any project, but make sure that the financing that goes to any project is linked to the betterment of a business climate, to the betterment of investment opportunities, and that will bring in and tie in the more longer term private finance that's required. Public sector finance can only go so far, and we're seeing that in the region because governments don't want to be indebted, and COVID has indebted everybody. So we need to be on the frontier of that, and on the frontier of those designs.
Yeah, so I agree with you, and I agree with you what's happened with COVID. I think one of the issues as well that I've noticed, and I'm sure it is an issue that you're dealing with, when I was in Guatemala and when I was traveling in the region, was just the expansion as well of China, which was incredible for me to witness, right? I mean, China was playing a significant role. I remember when I got there, the last trip I took to Guatemala, one of the issues I think that came up was the fact that the Chinese had invested in a major highway within Guatemala. And, nothing is for free. The Chinese don't do anything like out of the kindness of their heart. We all know that. And we know what's going on. When it comes to expanding in Central America, how do you guys deal with that? The Interdevelopment Bank deal with that?
So China is a member of our bank, is a shareholder. And I think that was part of sort of its effort to expand its footprint in the region, that with the absence of the United States in the region, China had an opportunity. How we're viewing that is we're trying to also turn that upside down because we know and we see it that there's a big problem that there is no strings attached in the world. That doesn't exist. The concept of free money doesn't exist. And I think a lot of the countries who received a lot of Chinese investment are realizing that there have been negative repercussions related to that money and related to the fact that it doesn't really reflect what they're looking for, which is sustainable investment in an environment of transparency and best practices, meeting with those international norms and standards, that because that's ultimately what improves their ability to attract more and more investment in over time and money over time in their countries. I think in terms of China, what we're seeing is that now in the COVID environment, there's a huge opportunity because we've seen Chinese investment dip in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think if we don't take this opportunity now in Latin America and the Caribbean to say we want to step up, we at the IDB as an institution want to be that bridge. We want to step up and create those opportunities where there's an opening. The United States should really step in. We should really think about that in terms of strategic interests. I said again, in the region, there are problems. There are obstacles to investment, but none of those are impossible to overcome. And I think if you start looking at the region, and I've looked at it for 25 years as part of my career as a student and living in there and working in there, that where everyone sees obstacles, we here at the IDB see opportunities. China is not an obstacle. China just took advantage of a huge opportunity that they were willing to take and stepped into these countries. And I've seen, like you, a lot of these projects that are now in shambles because they're poor quality, poor construction. Often they didn't even hire nationals within the country. They would bring in their own employees from China.
Correct.
So countries knew firsthand that this was easy money, yes, but long-term without the real payoff. What we're saying to them is make this an opportunity for yourselves. Work with us. We will work with you on anti-corruption, on transparency standards. We will bring in interested U.S. investors who hew to those norms that you want to hew to so that you, in the long run, can improve your capacity to absorb investment, can improve your business climates, and can improve how you are on the global platform in terms of bringing in sustainable growth. So that's our message to them. I think over time, they have seen the repercussions. Ecuador in particular is an interesting example because they're living it. And they've been trying to turn it around under the former administration of President Moreno. They've turned it completely around. And now you see them trying to get out of the morass of Chinese debt. We're going to see that over and over and over again. And we're here and standing ready to help these countries do all of that.
And that's going to be a really tough charge for Ecuador, and as well as for other nations who have taken so much money from China. The Chinese, you're right, are trying to get a message out across broadly, like, hey, if you do business with us, and I think it's more of a propaganda message, if you do business with us, we won't expect anything in return. This will be a no strings attached kind of cooperation, economic cooperation. I guess that's something that they're trying to message out there because it's that backlash does exist.
Right. And I think the message worked to a point. But I think now what we're trying to see is that the investments of China from the early 2000s to the mid 2000s are now, you're starting to see the lack of fruits of that investment. Because what I've said before is true. You've seen the infrastructure that the Chinese have built that hasn't stood the test of time. You've seen that there were no jobs that were created. It was just a single project, a lot of money dumped in, and that was it. Now, what you've seen is a change in their approach, where now you see Chinese state-owned enterprises coming in under certain guises to try to wedge themselves in certain sectors that are strategic for them. Telecom,
national security being one.
5G in Latin America, et cetera. I think that what you're now seeing is governments hesitate. And what we want to say is that hesitation is an opportunity. It presents a huge opportunity for the United States. It presents a huge opportunity for us, because that means as they hesitate because they see the negative repercussions of early decisions to agree to the quote unquote no strings attached money from China, now they are actively looking for other interested investors. And I think that's where we all need to be upfront and honest and say, if you want new investors, maybe the sectors need some reforms. Maybe we need to work on transparency, but let's do that together. We are happy to work with partners who want to invest in sectors, and we want to share that risk with them because it's far better for us, dollar for dollar, as the IDB, who has the U.S. is a 30% shareholder. So dollar for dollar, bang for your buck is have these governments work with the IDB, and we can bring in legitimate investors that meet the due diligence standards, that meet ESG standards, that meet all of the standards that are expected today in the business environment that we're seeing.
And I think that this is really important. You all have said this in the past. I think it's available online as well, but you've said that there's reasons for concern. First of all, Cuba's cooperation with China on the Belt Road Initiative, that's a big one. Nicaragua decided to cut diplomatic ties with Taiwan, and that's a huge issue right there. And I've talked to folks about that. And, they've reestablished direct relations with Beijing. Straight up, I feel that the United States has really dropped the ball in many ways over the last decade with Central America and with Latin America and with our partners in the Western Hemisphere. And I really don't know why that happened, because these are our neighbors. These are the people we should be paying attention to. These are our neighbors that directly influence what happens here in the United States. I mean, tell me I'm wrong. I don't think I am. I've traveled a lot of the world, and I've seen the relationships that Pakistan, for instance, builds with its neighbor because it's in the region. Always with China because they're closer, they're South Asia, but with their neighbors in the region. I feel like the United States, and I'm glad the bank is doing this and really pushing these initiatives because I feel that we have to start picking up the slack. The reason people are coming here is because they're not finding jobs at home.
Without having a policy hat on anymore since I've left government, but in my time in government, I'm really proud of the work that I did because it was in part to respond to what you're talking about. I think for the last decade, or I would even say, I venture to say almost in the last 20 years, both sides in the United States, I think, worked on an assumption that was wrong. An assumption that the Latin America and Caribbean region will always be our friends, just because we share a hemisphere. And I think,
right.
I think based on that erroneous assumption, perhaps there was a lack of proaction on the part of the United States in terms of ensuring frequent engagement, having a footprint and having a presence, which I learned in my career in government, sometimes doesn't take a lot of effort. But it's important to strengthen those alliances, to strengthen those friendships. And I think now where I am sitting from the perch of working on development for the good of the people and taking a step back, I can see how a lack of engagement can give a perception within the region of a total lack of interest that will make you inherently want to pivot to the next best thing. But I think what we're seeing now in Latin America and the Caribbean is a very open door that you literally could just push open, and it's huge opportunities. It's a very welcoming environment for the United States right now, today. And I say that because we speak frequently with a lot of leaders in a lot of these countries where they are desperate for the United States to have a presence, a signal of interest. And I think right now, what we're seeing is that they're seeing some of those signals and they're turning to us at the IDB to see how we can work with them so that they can have those stronger ties, again, to the U.S. government, ties back to U.S. investors. Yes.
And also, not to cut you off, but and also, with this idea of immigration, right? And with what we're seeing at our southern border, when people have jobs, when they have an economy, when they are able, when these governments are able to invest in their people, right? Even the United States, there's no country that is immune to how you treat your people, what your people do. If they can put food on the table and get their kids in school, they're not gonna be flooding to another country. People want to stay where they were born. They love their nation. They're patriot to it, but they can't be that way if they're suffering. And I think that I try to explain to people all the time, when you travel to other parts of the world and you see underdeveloped nations or countries where there's so much corruption or where there's not good economic investment, you just see what can happen, and it can change globally. It can change the migration of people. It can change a nation entirely. I think the United States, for national security reasons, needs this, right? We need to focus more on investing in our Western Hemisphere and really building democracy in all of these nations.
I completely agree 100%. I'll give you two quick just flash anecdotes and responses to your comments. One, I'm a child of immigrants who came from Colombia and Ecuador, who they were lucky enough to be educated when they got here. But the reason they left, and this is why it's so special and important, the work that I'm doing here at the IDB, they left because they knew that even with an education, they had no opportunities in their countries. And the only place they could go was the United States. And so they abandoned everything to come here. And so I'm a product of that story, of that immigrant story of people with no opportunities in the region, desperately seeking a way to use their education and see some product of that in a positive light. And that's why I constantly give back. I gave back through the US government because of what this country has done with my family, and I'm giving back now to the region. But what I say is it's also very sad because that's a story of 60 years ago. My parents left over 60 years ago, their respective countries, and never looked back because of no opportunities. And I find it to be honestly an honor that I'm a child of a product of that story, now trying to help improve the region in a good way. But also I wanted to just say that in terms of immigration, I think that what these countries also understand is that there's been an absence of a social contract. What we've seen in the region in the last 2 years is that a lot of citizens are finally trying to demand the accountability from their governments that they never felt empowered to demand before. And we see that as an opportunity. And I think in particular in Central America, we've talked to all of the leaders of the 3 countries of the Northern Triangle. We know that they are desperate to try to find ways to keep their citizens at home because they know it's a national security threat as viewed by the United States, but also more importantly, it's a drain of human capital for them. And it's a brain drain that you cannot replace. You can never replace it. Once you lose a generation, you've lost it for literally another generation.
I saw that with my own eyes. I went to villages in Guatemala that were basically almost emptied out. I mean, where there were very few people, where the economy was shuttered, where, people were desperate. And, they do have industry. They have agriculture. They have, they could have more education. I think that was lacking. And, they could have better health care. But that all comes with a vibrant economy, and people working instead of people taking handouts. And let me ask you this last question. It's kind of, we always are issuing in the United States, budgeting out money for a crisis, handing out money to NGOs and this and that. But instead of putting it where it would actually reap the rewards, you know what I mean? You can dress someone, you can give them an outfit, you can buy them some food, but to teach them how to make that money and make it constant and invest would be so much more than just throwing money to me away and not putting it in the right, I guess, maybe in the right investments for the people in those regions. I mean, is that something that you're looking at as well?
Absolutely, 100%. And I want to just say one thing here too. What we've done, and in particular what I have tried to do, is try to have a more holistic approach to development to address exactly what you're talking about. Because I think here the problem is exactly the focus, the singular focus. If we invest here, it'll have a trickle down effect in terms of solutions, will create jobs, and people will stop leaving these countries. And that's not true. You actually have to invest across the board because you have a lot of stakeholders here. You have stakeholders from community leaders all the way up to the government ranks. And so what we've done is we've tried to look at that mapping of stakeholders to see how to better integrate them. In particular in the Northern Triangle, I would say that we spent probably the first half of last year trying to figure out what a mapping would look like where we can start bridging those gaps. Because I think a lot of the failures here, and I'm talking failures institutionally in terms of our ability to have more impact in the Northern Triangle, is because we didn't take the time to understand how to bring in the stakeholders, how to incentivize them to work with us and with the governments and with communities. I mean, you have to have a 3-legged stool here, especially in these very complex countries as they are, to be able to really find a holistic solution. Because you're right in what you said, that I think investing in one organization or another, that's not a holistic view of the actual problem. You have to view the problem in its entirety to be able to define a solution in its entirety. And so what we are doing at the IDB is exactly that. Who are the stakeholders that should be at the table, that haven't been at the table? How do we empower them? How do we incentivize them to work with partners internally and externally? And then how do we ensure that they see how a solution benefits them? I think a large part of the problem that we've seen in the Northern Triangle in particular is that very driven by agendas and a lack of ability to sort of make more concrete what that solution means in terms of benefits ultimately, not just to the people who can finally feel like they're safe, they're receiving citizen security is a plus, there's no corruption. We can be as idealistic and aspirational as you want to be, but at its core, the problem that as I view it and as we've tried to resolve for is you haven't had all the stakeholders at the right table at the right time, and you haven't created an incentives-based system for everyone to want to work together. So what we've done is try to create mechanisms to facilitate that.
I think that's incredible. I am so excited to get to know you. I think as I continue and as I continue to travel, especially when I go to Guatemala or if I go to El Salvador, we have a lot of trips planned this year. I want to continue to talk to you because I just want to kind of get ideas and bring those stories home. I think for the American public, I mean, they really need to care about this. I mean, this is affecting all of our lives. Our neighbors in the Western Hemisphere, it's not like it's just happening next door. I mean, it affects every single one of us, right? And I want to thank you again, Jessica, for being a part of this show. You've been amazing. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And I really appreciate the platform. And like I said, I think for those of us that are lucky, I would say lucky and honored enough, or even privileged to travel to the region, you get to see firsthand the challenges in the region. There's so much opportunity, but I just want to make sure that for your audience in particular, they know that beyond the headlines, you're talking about a region that might have glowing, wonderful cities, but on the margins, you have extreme poverty and extreme need. And that's what I'm here to do every day, to try to figure out how to fill those needs and address them and work with governments so that all of us can be prosperous. Because if the region is prosperous, the United States is prosperous.
100%. I agree with you on that. No doubt. You can't shut it out. We're all here in the same region. We all depend and rely on one another. And I think the more money we invest in Central America and Mexico and South America, and they invest in us, I think the better off we'll all be.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Jessica.
you. I really appreciate it.
The stock market is volatile, and the current administration looks to increase your taxes, guys, pander to China, and mislead you about inflation. That's far worse than a few mean tweets, don't you think? So in honor of better financial times, Universal Coin and Bullion is offering a 1-ounce pure silver tribute coin featuring America's 45th president, Donald J. Trump, at their cost. You'll get a pure 1-ounce silver coin honoring the former president at the same price Universal Coin buys it from their vendors. Think about that. Throughout history, silver and gold have been a hedge against inflation and a guaranteed asset you can turn to when times are uncertain. And with Biden and Harris in office, the uncertainty seems to be getting worse. Diversify your portfolio and add a pure silver Trump coin to your investments now. And the postage is, guess what? Free. Call Universal Coin at 1-800-UCB-GOLD. That's 1-800-UCB-GOLD. Their professional staff, led by America's gold expert, Dr. Mike Fulgens, are waiting for you to call at 1-800-UCB-GOLD to get you pure silver President Trump tribute coin at dealer's cost. Okay, and now without any further delay, I've got my great friend, Gary Brugman. Thanks, Gary, for hanging out while I've been on the podcast. You've been so patient. There's huge news right now, right? I mean, I couldn't even believe it. As you were sitting here just right before you got on, we were looking at some stories and what just happened. It's big news.
And I got a message from Victor Avila.
Explain who Victor Avila is, because a lot of people don't know who he is. He was on the show. I suggest anybody who is listening right now, go back and listen to a few podcasts ago where I interviewed Victor. But just so people know, we've all been good friends with him, but you've known him for quite a long time.
Well, Victor Avila is a retired Homeland Security agent. He was a victim of Fast and Furious. He was a ICE agent in Mexico and was traveling from Monterrey to Mexico City when he was ambushed by Las Zetas cartel. And they opened fire on him. They killed his partner, Jaime Zapata, and he got shot 3 times. And he's a really close friend of mine. And as you were doing your podcast, he just sent me a text here that Mexico charges 7 in a Fast and Furious weapons trafficking case.
Remember, this is the same case that the Obama administration just basically refused to admit the truth on. They shut down everything. They disallowed anyone to investigate. I remember this was probably one of the most explosive cases, according to the DOJ, in U.S. history, really modern history. We were moving weapons, literally unmarked weapons, into Mexico.
Yep, and also Brian Terry was also killed with Fast and Furious weapons. Jaime Zapata was killed with Fast and Furious weapons that disappeared in Mexico. And they also, I found out recently, they had links to several weapons in the Benghazi assault on the CIA annex, where our contractors fought for 13 hours. They found Fast and Furious weapons in Libya.
I want you to listen to what's happening here, you guys. This is what I'm talking about. When we sit back and we just trust, my job as a journalist, you know this, Gary, before I started the podcast, before I started maybe opining more on issues, was to hold the government accountable, to investigate what was going on. Do you feel, just so everybody out there knows, Gary not only survived COVID and we're sitting really close to each other. Gary's probably worried that I have COVID.
Not I.
But Gary really did survive COVID, 53 days in the hospital. But you spent 20 years of your life fighting for a pardon because of the injustice that happened to you in the government, actually under the Bush administration with Johnny Sutton. I mean, so you know what these law enforcement officials are going through, what they're up against, what they're fighting, right?
You know, and it's kind of crazy when I talk about that because look at the government's capable of anything. And it really upsets me. I won't say pisses me off. It really upsets me because look at what they've done to General Flynn. Look at what they've done, Bernard Kerik. Look at what they did to President Trump. You know, the president of the United States, a billionaire, President Trump. What chance did a field agent like me have? You know, I never stood a chance against the government. You can't fight the federal government because they will just bring you into the poorhouse. There's no fight in the federal government for a regular person.
That is 100% true, Gary, 100%. You unlimited pockets, and we're left there just scratching at the walls, hoping that somebody's going to listen. I remember that with you. I remember when I first met you, and I was thinking, like, how did this happen to you? How did you spend 2 years in Yazoo, Mississippi, in the prison system for nothing, for basically doing your job? But when you hear stories about, you know, people questioning what's going on with the COVID-19 mandates and with lockdowns, and you see that people aren't even allowed to speak up, that their voices are silenced, that they're shunned or ostracized or removed basically from social media, or people like Victor Avila, who had to fight to get the truth out, and the death of other Border Patrol agents in this Fast and Furious scandal. I mean, did anybody ever, other than the Mexican cartels, did anybody in the Obama administration ever pay a price for this Fast and Furious scandal?
Of course not. Holder needs to be held accountable because he's the one that started the project. He was the Attorney General of the United States. The ATF needs to be held accountable, whoever was responsible for that, all the way up to the president, who denied that there was ever such an operation. It was denied that there was ever such an operation. I knew some gun store owners in Arizona who have told me that people would come in to buy these weapons, and they would literally talk to the ATF and says, I don't feel comfortable selling these people this weapon. They said, go ahead and sell them. We're going to track them. And they lost all of them.
That's what I'm talking about. It's like no one has been held accountable. And then they think because they're going to throw us a few bones, have Mexico make a few arrests, Mexico goes ahead and charges, Chapo Guzman, Joaquin Chapo Guzman with, Fast and Furious. But Fast and Furious wouldn't even have existed. They would have never even had those guns had we not supplied it to them.
Correct. It says that they're charging some of their top police officials. One of them was a security chief for President Felipe Calderon from 06 to 12, which covers that time period. But they're also charging Chapo Guzman, who's serving life in prison in the United States. So what good does that do?
Right.
What good does that do? They're charging him, but he's already in prison. It just makes no sense. It's just like they're creating this stuff just to pacify.
That's exactly it. And I want you to think about this. Those guys that they're charging in Mexico right now, those federal officials, okay, all well and good, but there's no doubt in my mind, and I bet you in yours, that the new drug cartel member in town, Nuevo Generacion, the new people in charge of Chapo Guzman's, empire, they are throwing a bone, making the Mexican government look good, trying to make the U.S. government look good under President Biden. And in the end, guys, those people that they're turning over to them, those people that are being charged, were people that they would have gotten rid of anyways. I love living in Texas, Gary. I hope you come and stop by the podcast all the time. I like to do your podcast too. By the way, where can people go if they want to hear your podcast?
You can listen to my podcast anywhere you listen to it. Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, everywhere. Oh, and also go to YouTube, the Gary Brugman Podcast, because they're all on there as well.
He uses a lot of dirty language, so
I do.
Just watch out when you're playing it around your kids. But it's super fun and it's great. It's a great podcast, and I love being a part of it. I love you being a part of this show and being a part of our life and being a part of my family. You're my brother.
I love that you're so close to me now.
I know.
It's so awesome. Oh, by the way, and on the language thing, I figured if it worked for Joe Rogan, it'll work for me.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. It's so great to have you a part of my life as well. Remember, you can always go to saraacarter.com, saraacarter.com to get the top latest stories. And remember, here is where the story begins, and we are taking the story back. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. God bless you, and God bless the great state of Texas and the United States of America.
Hi, it's Dana Lash, host of The Dana Show. Every day, I'm here to keep you up to speed on the most important stories and info that you need to know in your very busy life. And if you're always on the go and you want to stay connected, just download our daily podcast and take it with you. It's a great way to get up to speed on what you need to know and what legacy media may not be telling you. Visit danaradio.com and click on the podcast link or subscribe at iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.